Yo, how's it going everybody? You got Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. And on today's episode, it's been a little while since the Aero Fighters series has been talked about, and when I heard a new one was coming from developer Success, I was pretty hyped. After a few decades, Aero Fighters is back for modern consoles and PC. Today we're checking out Sonic Wings Reunion, developed by Success and published by Hamster and Red Art Games. It's into the PlayStation, PC, and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we'll be looking at today. Let's check out the mission brief real quick. In the year 20XX, an evil organization known as Fata Morgana launches a global attack using the world's military weapons against humanity. Despite being defeated in several timelines, they have returned once again, and the only ones who can stop them is Team Project Blue, an international team of pilots sent to battle the enemy and save the world. The band is back together again, and the world tour has several new and destructive stops. Gameplay wise, you've got a 2.5D vertical shooter that takes you on a world tour through 8 stages of mayhem as you venture through a few familiar locations and a few new ones to the series. You have several returning pilots from the Sonic Wings franchise like a now human Keaton, Hien, Witty, and Mau Mau, alongside newcomers like Glinda. You have a primary weapon for each pilot and a special weapon that has limited use per stock. A new addition here is the Team Up special, where you can have an extra special attack from another pilot as an assist. This mixes up the playstyle quite a bit depending on what pilots you pair up, and there are some killer combos you can assemble to demolish the Fata Morgana threat across the globe. Each location has currency to pick up as bonus points, and each stage has an end boss. True to Sonic Wings fashion, weapon upgrades decrease over time unless you keep picking up weapon icons, and keeping them at max level gives you a double multiplier in addition to having more firepower to carve through the opposition. You can carry 6 bombs, but once you get hit, you default back to 3. Special attacks will vary depending on the pilot, and all can be useful in the right situation, but be aware not all special attacks are lethal. The game has 2 loops, with the first one being relatively easy even if you aren't familiar with more frantic vertical shoot-em-ups. The second loop, however, feels steep with the difficulty considering enemies have more hit points, and with the weapons constantly degrading, you'll have to know when to engage and when to evade. DOS controls are very tight here, which is a necessity on the second loop since some enemies you just won't be able to shoot through alone. Bullet patterns are also dialed up to the points where some levels will have slowdown when a lot of enemies and bullets are on screen. While certain characters are pretty overpowered at max level, the second loop is where the challenge truly sets in. That's not saying it isn't fun, but the sharp adjustment is noticeable the moment you fly in on that second loop. Levels outside of the bonus stage will also be randomized on each loop, so the game certainly keeps you on your toes with every run. The Arctic Ocean is always stage 7 on the loop before getting to the Fata Morgana base, and these levels are the peak of hectic. The bonus stage returns as you fly over the oceans of Iran, taking down as many enemies as possible and a mini-boss before the time expires, and this will get you a lot of weapon upgrades and bomb stocks. What's crazy here is that I didn't know you could actually lose stocks here if you're unlucky. Despite the enemies not shooting at you, collision is still possible if you're not paying attention. Bosses will all vary in difficulty here, with a few of them being pretty simple to others dump trucking damage if you aren't careful. The Florida encounter mainly comes to mind where, depending on which loop and what difficulty you start on, you can't touch the rocket with your craft at all. The exhaust also deals critical damage depending on what difficulty, so spamming this boss with specials is pretty much the way to go on anything above easy. The final boss can have a couple of forms depending on loop, and depending on character can be 2-tapped with certain special attacks. The difficulty kind of jumps around, but some parts stay the same, which is interesting. But with the Infinite Continues, the only real downside is losing your score, which does have a global leaderboard standings for each character and setting. Graphics wise, Sonic Wings Reunion runs on the Unity engine and is the first game of the franchise to be released since 1997, and being developed by Success, you would expect it to be fairly polished. The 2.5D style of Reunion looks like what series fans would have wanted out of the Nintendo 64 Aero Fighters Assault, and that's mostly a good thing. To see something like this decades later reminds me of games like Under Defeat or even Star Soldier Vanishing Earth, and for the most part does look okay despite the announcement trailer looking somewhat underwhelming. The 3D backgrounds have a decent amount of things happening with all the explosions and destruction, and it doesn't look bad even though there are better looking shooters out there. The locales each have their own personalities and bring relative elements into its design, including decent attention to regional detail. The stages stay true to the original concepts of weaving in notable aspects of each locale, even though they are a bit dialed back compared to the hand-drawn entries of the 90s. You get a few sweeping camera angles like pulling up into the stratosphere during the rocket encounter and the airship coming out of the waterfall. The stages are limited in the color palettes, but does compensate with the constant destruction unfolding on the ground. For all the good stuff going on visually, there's only a few things that look a bit janky, like the in-game sprites. Sprites are 3D models with limited animation during gameplay, but it isn't too stiff looking. The animation on bosses is pretty smooth and has some decent visual effects, even though they aren't the craziest things you've ever seen. You'll see some returning in boss encounters if you're familiar with the series, and the final boss is on the second loop, but there could be hidden encounters yet to be discovered. After a few dozen clears though, on both loops, I've only seen one final boss, and not nearly as many random encounters as the earlier entries though. Segue and ending cutscenes also retain the humor the series is known for, and several of these are pretty funny, and all of them are pretty over the top with the narrative. The crossover dialogue is also hilarious, depending on what pilot combos you choose. However, the departure from the original entries is the ending cutscenes being different on the second loop, which they are not here. With the substantially increased difficulty on the second loop, you would think a different ending is in there, but unfortunately, it's the same one before going to the leaderboard screens. Sound-wise, this is a bit of a mixed bag, so we'll start with the good stuff first. The soundtrack from composer Soshi Hosoe has a variety of tracks that fall in line with Aero Fighters 3, having more electronic music like drum and bass and such. There's also an arrange mode, and a mode where it's all Mau Mau tracks, so you've got a lot of options for the background music. The original tunes won't set the world on fire, but are some serviceable jams. The Mau Mau mode is pretty funny, full of J-pop anthems. The audio balance of the effects and music are a bit wonky, and after turning the background music down, the sound effects were still on the lower end. The shots and explosions sound quiet and don't have the same oomph that the video system entries did decades prior. While there are some layers of boom here, the explosions sound like they're either muted or compressed like they're underwater most of the time. The special attacks here are another story, however, having really pronounced sound effects when they're detonated. It's strange hearing the audio so dialed back on a shoot 'em up, especially from a developer like Success that usually has pretty solid quality audio in their games. Much like the music, for what's there, it's passable, but you would expect a little more, especially if you're someone who's familiar with the series. The quality of the audio is on the same pace as the graphics being good enough, but at times underwhelming when you consider what past entries accomplished with less powerful hardware decades ago. To sum it up, Sonic Wings Reunion is a serviceable shoot 'em up game, and while it's awesome to see the series come back, you would hope for a little more triumphant return. While the sentiment of the original series is there, it just doesn't have the same charm as the video system developed titles. This is nowhere near as polarizing as 1997's Aero Fighters Assault, but again a noticeable shift in quality compared to the originals. The game is challenging, especially once you get to the second loop, but it will feel steep due to enemies having more lopsided health. There are some nice cameos series vets will recognize, but the newer enemies won't strike you as much as past ones despite some good ideas being in there. Sonic Wings Reunion gets a 6.5 out of 10 as it currently stands, and I would only recommend it to super fans of the franchise or shoot 'em up fans that like to give everything a try regardless of it necessarily being the best. It's not the worst shoot 'em up out there, but there are a lot of areas where it could have gotten a little more polished. The imaginative designs and action of the original trilogy is what made them stand out, and this new entry decades later just doesn't quite hit the same, but it does get the basics right with tight controls, a sense of humor, and frenetic encounters. This is available on the Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, and PC, and if you're after a physical copy of this, I will wait until it goes on sale if you really want to play it before the Western release, which will hopefully iron out the current issues and maybe add a little more content to the game, since outside of the leaderboard standings, there isn't much to go for. Longtime fans of the series will get the most out of this release, but newcomers may want to visit the back catalog before this entry or wait for it to become cheaper. And I thank you again if you made it this far into the video, and if you find these videos helpful, that's awesome, glad you use it as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries come up in the near future. But until then, take it easy and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.